Hi everyone, how are you? I hope you're going well. Today we're going to be talking about how the Queensland ATAR works. So if you've done any research about the ATAR, you've probably come across information for other states, and it's good to know that the ATAR is actually calculated differently depending on the state that you do Year 12 in. In the end, doesn't make too much of a difference. All of the states have agreed that you are still comparable to other states' ATARs and that it's still a system that can work Australia-wide. But if you're going into Queensland Year 11 and 12, it's really good to understand how our system works. So let's talk about it. Okay, so what do you need to do to get an ATAR? So you need to be ATAR eligible in Year 11 and 12, and that means picking subjects that would allow you to get an ATAR. What you need is at least 4 general subjects. You might take more than that, but the minimum you need is at least 4. You also need to do at least one other subject. That might be an applied subject. It might be a VET qualification, so a vocational education and training qualification, at least a Cert 3 or higher. Cert 2s can't contribute to your ATAR. And you also need to pass your English subject in Year 12, or what we'd consider Unit 3 and 4. That English subject can be an applied English, or it can be a general English, but you need to pass it. And if you don't pass it, you can't get your ATAR. So that's the first step. You need to have subjects that allow you to get an ATAR. Generally, QTAC will say take at least 5 general subjects if you want to maximize your ATAR. The reason they say this is because general subjects generally will scale higher than applied subjects or completed VET qualifications. I'll include a list of general, applied, and VET qualifications that can contribute to an ATAR, maybe in the description, but I'll also just put them up here for a second. There are a lot of subjects to choose from. If you're making subject selections, part of what you're going to be limited by is what your school offers, because most schools don't offer every single subject, but you should still have a fair bit of choice. And as I've mentioned before, particularly on my blog, and QTAC will constantly say this, when you're choosing subjects, you should be thinking about what you're going to do well in, what you enjoy, and what might meet the prerequisites for further study, if that's something you're thinking about doing. Sometimes people think about the scaling and only the scaling, and that's not a great way to go because 1, the scaling can change year to year, but 2, how you actually perform in a subject is a really big part of how your ATAR is calculated. So, even if you took all the subjects that have scaled well in the past, if you don't do well in them, then you're probably not going to get a great ATAR. But if you took a bunch of subjects you liked that maybe weren't ones that scaled up in the past, by heaps, but you did really well in those subjects, then most likely you're going to have a much better ATAR. So definitely think about the subjects you like and the subjects you're good at when you're choosing subjects. Okay, so yes, firstly, you need to be ATAR eligible. And we've talked about that, and I'll put a summary up in the description and up here. 4 minimum general subjects, 1 other subject of some kind, and a pass in English. You need all those things. Once you are ATAR eligible, you need to complete Unit 3 and 4, which is usually completed in Year 12. And those are 2 big units. They usually run for about 2 terms per unit. And the QCAA, which is the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority, they will come up with your final marks in all of your subjects. So depending on the subjects you take, your marks might be made up of 75% internal assessment and 25% external exam result. It might be 50-50. It might be 3 internal assessments and 1 common internal assessment that is shared between all the different schools in the state. Once QCAA have your final marks, they send them to QTAC. And actually they'll send all of Year 12 marks across to QTAC at the same time. This allows QTAC to do what they call the inter-subject scaling, and this is where QTAC look at how the whole Year 12 cohort performed, and they scale the subjects accordingly. You might be able to tell there's a cat on my lap. So when QTAC do that scaling, that's how I guess they try to make it fair. They look at, okay, which subjects seem to be a bit harder than the others? How can we more fairly weight students' results across subjects? Once they've scaled everybody's results, they then figure out which were your 5 best results. Most students in year 11 and 12 will take 6 subjects, so potentially you have up to 6 possible inputs for your ATAR. QTAC will find the best 5 and they'll add those together, and that will give you a number. And they call this sometimes the subject aggregate, or your best 5 subject aggregate. But basically, they're just giving you a number, and that's the number they're going to use to give you your ATAR. What they do next is put everybody in the state in order of highest combined number to lowest combined number. They call this descending order of merit. So they then have this really, really long list, which has a bunch of students' names and the combined number from their scaled results from their best 5 subjects. QTAC then figure out, okay, how many students will be in each ATAR band this year? And when I say ATAR band, I mean 99.95, that's one ATAR band. 99.9, that's one ATAR band. 99.85, that's another ATAR band. There's 2,000 possible bands in the ATAR. The way that QTAC figure out how many students will be in each band is by looking at the number of students in year 12 in that year and dividing it by 2,000, the number of bands. Usually what happens is there's about 30 to 32 students per band. Once QTAC know, okay, this is the number of students per band, they can go back to the big long list of people from highest to lowest aggregates, and they can start to assign students to each band. So the top 30 to 32, depending on how many students are in year 12 in that year, will get the 99.95 ATAR. The next 30 to 32 students will get the 99.9, and so on. Then they can release those results to you. And usually that's done through the ATAR portal. You can log into that portal and find out, okay, what was my ATAR? So hopefully that's helped you to better understand how the ATAR works in Queensland. If you found this video helpful, you might like to like it. If you'd like to see similar videos in the future, please consider subscribing to my channel. If you want more advice about your own situation, I'd always recommend talking to a careers counsellor. Good luck. Have a lovely day.